Some of us know what it feels like when your gut tells you something is terribly wrong, even when everyone else thinks you're paranoid. Some of us understand the weight of protecting your child when you're the only one who sees the danger lurking behind a perfect smile and expensive clothes. Henry Diaz was about to discover that his instincts about the mysterious woman who'd entered their lives were more accurate than he'd ever imagined, and far more dangerous than he dared to fear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It started with a job posting that seemed too good to be true. Private estate seeks experienced groundskeeper, excellent pay, housing provided, family-friendly environment. Henry had been searching for months, ever since the landscaping company he'd worked for went under, leaving him scrambling to keep up with rent on their tiny apartment in Riverside Falls while caring for his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. The address led him to Thornfield Estate, a sprawling property on the outskirts of town that looked like something from a movie. Manicured gardens stretched as far as he could see, punctuated by fountains and marble statuary that probably cost more than Henry made in a year. The mansion itself was a masterpiece of colonial architecture, all white columns and soaring windows that caught the morning light like jewels. Henry adjusted his tie, his only good one, worn thin from too many job interviews, and walked up the curved stone path to the front door. His work-roughened hands felt clumsy as he rang the bell, the sound echoing to what must have been vast hallways beyond. The woman who answered took his breath away. She was perhaps 35, with honey blonde hair that fell in perfect waves and green eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Her clothes whispered money, not flashy, but the kind of understated elegance that came from never having to check price tags. Everything about her screamed wealth and refinement, from her manicured nails to the subtle design of perfume that drifted toward him as she stepped closer. "You must be Henry Diaz," she said, her voice carrying the cultured tones of expensive education. "I'm Vivian Blackthorne. Thank you for coming." Henry found himself momentarily speechless. In his experience, wealthy people didn't answer their own doors, and they certainly didn't look at unemployed landscapers with such genuine warmth. But there was something else in her expression, a flicker of something that might have been recognition, though he was certain they'd never met. "Ma'am," Henry managed, extending a calloused hand that looked rough against her smooth palm. "Thank you for considering me for the position." "Please, call me Vivian." Her smile was radiant, transforming her face from merely beautiful to luminous. "I have a feeling you're exactly what we've been looking for." The interview, if it could be called that, was unlike anything Henry had experienced. Instead of the usual questions about experience and references, Vivian seemed more interested in his daughter, his dreams for their future, his philosophy about hard work and integrity. She walked him through the gardens, pointing out areas that needed attention, but her questions kept returning to personal matters. "Lily is 8, you said?" she asked as they paused beside a rose garden that probably required a team of specialists to maintain. "Does she like flowers? Gardens?" "She loves anything beautiful," Henry replied, wondering why an employer would care about his daughter's preferences. "She's got an artist's eye, always finding pretty rocks or interesting leaves to bring home." Something shifted in Vivian's expression, a shadow that passed so quickly he might have imagined it. How wonderful. Children see magic where adults only see ordinary things. The job offer came before they'd even finished the tour. Excellent salary, full benefits, and most incredibly, a renovated carriage house on the property where he and Lily could live rent-free. It was more than Henry had dared to hope for, the answer to prayers he'd been afraid to voice. "There is one condition," Vivian added as they stood outside the charming 2-bedroom cottage that will be their new home. "I value privacy above all else. The estate is a sanctuary for me. I hope you understand." Henry nodded, though something in her tone sent a chill down his spine. Privacy was one thing, but there was an intensity to her words that felt more like a warning than a preference. That night, as Henry tucked Lily into bed in their cramped apartment one last time before the move, he tried to shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Vivian Blackthorne was beautiful, generous, and had literally saved their lives with this opportunity. So why did he feel like he was walking into a trap? "Daddy," Lily said, her voice sleepy but concerned, "are you sure about the new house?" Henry smoothed her dark hair, so much like her mother's that it sometimes took his breath away. Carmen had been gone 3 years now, cancer taking her just as their little family had found its rhythm. Since then, it had been just him and Lily against the world. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I don't know," Lily murmured, already half asleep. "Something feels different about it, like we're not supposed to be there." Children, Henry had learned, often picked up on things adults missed, but this time, he told himself, Lily was just nervous about another change. They'd moved twice since Carmen died, each time hoping for something better, more stable. As he sat in their small living room later that night, staring at the contract Vivian had given him, Henry couldn't shake the memory of that moment of recognition in her eyes when she'd first seen him. Had they met before? It seemed impossible. He would have remembered someone like her, but there had been something there, something she hadn't wanted him to see. The papers were generous to the point of being suspicious, no probationary period, no detailed background check requirements, and a clause about confidentiality that seemed unusually strict for a groundskeeper position. Most unsettling was a paragraph near the end that gave Vivian discretionary authority over all aspects of the employee's residence on the property, including but not limited to guests, activities, and duration of occupancy. Henry set the contract aside and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights that would soon be replaced by the vast darkness of the estate. Tomorrow, Henry and Lily would begin a new chapter of their lives, one that promised security and hope after months of uncertainty. So why did he feel like he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life? Before we continue this story, tell us where you're watching from, and if you think you know where this is heading, drop your predictions in the comments, because what Henry discovers about Vivian Blackthorne will shock you more than you can imagine. The move to Thornfield Estate felt like stepping into another world. Henry loaded his modest possessions into his aging pickup truck, while Lily clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, a worn thing named Mr. Buttons that had been her constant companion since Carmen's death. The contrast between their few boxes and the grandeur awaiting them wasn't lost on Henry. It felt like they were pretending to be people they weren't. Vivian was waiting for them at the carriage house when they arrived, but something was different about her today. Where she'd been warm and engaging during their meeting, now she seemed almost watchful. Her smile was just as radiant, but Henry caught her studying him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "Welcome home," she said, and the word home lingered strangely in the air between them. The carriage house was even more beautiful than Henry remembered. Hardwood floors gleamed under warm lighting, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a magazine. Lily's eyes went wide as she explored her new bedroom, complete with built-in bookshelves and a window seat overlooking the gardens. "This is too much," Henry said quietly to Vivian as they watched Lily discover her new space. "I mean, I'm grateful, but this is far beyond what any groundskeeper should expect." Vivian's laugh sounded practiced, almost rehearsed. "Nonsense. I believe in taking care of the people who matter." She paused, and Henry felt that strange recognition flicker in her eyes again. "Besides, Lily deserves beautiful things. Every child does." There it was again, that focus on his daughter. Henry's protective instincts, honed for 3 years of single parenting, began to hum with warning signals. "How did you know Carmen liked gardenias?" Henry asked suddenly, the question surprising even himself. Vivian froze. In Lily's bedroom, there was a small vase of gardenias on the windowsill, Carmen's favorite flower, something Henry was sure he'd never mentioned during their interview. I didn't know," Vivian stammered, the first time Henry had seen her composure crack. "I just thought they were lovely. Lucky guess."
But her face had gone pale, and Henry noticed her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the vase. It wasn't a lucky guess. Somehow, impossibly, Vivian Blackthorne knew things about his dead wife that she had no business knowing. "Daddy, look!" Lily called from the living room, her voice filled with delight. Henry and Vivian rushed to see what had captured her attention. On the mantelpiece sat a series of framed photographs, professional shots of the estate, a nature scene, and then something that made Henry's blood run cold.
One photo showed a playground in what looked like a public park. Henry recognized it immediately. Riverside Memorial Park, where he took Lily every Sunday after visiting Carmen's grave. But this wasn't a stock photo or tourist shot. The angle was too specific, too familiar. This was taken from the bench where Henry always sat while Lily played, the exact spot where he'd spent countless hours watching his daughter and talking to Carmen's memory. "Where'd you get this?" Henry's voice came out sharper than he intended. Vivian moved quickly to the mantelpiece, her practiced smile slipping back into place. "Oh, I collect local photography, supporting local artists, you know?" But she was removing the photo as she spoke, her movements hurried and defensive. Henry felt like the world was tilting off its axis. First the gardenias, now this? These weren't coincidences. Someone had been watching them, studying them, learning their patterns and preferences. But why? "Miss Blackthorne," Henry said, his voice carefully controlled, "I think there's been some mistake. This job, this house, it's all too much. Maybe we should—" "Please," Vivian interrupted. And for the first time, Henry heard something desperate in her voice. "Please don't leave. Not yet. I know this seems strange, but I can explain everything. I need you to trust me." She looked at Lily, who was now arranging her stuffed animals on the expensive couch, completely oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. "She's so beautiful," Vivian whispered, and Henry saw tears glittering in her green eyes. "She looks exactly like—" "Like who?" Henry demanded. Vivian caught herself, wiping away the tears with a manicured hand. "Like a child who deserves every happiness in the world. Henry, I know this is overwhelming, but please, give me a chance to show you that this is where you both belong." Henry wanted to pack up their things and leave immediately. Every instinct screamed that Vivian Blackthorne was dangerous, that her interest in his family was anything but innocent. But then he looked at Lily, saw how she was already making herself at home in this beautiful space, and remembered the stack of unpaid bills sitting on his kitchen table back in town. 1 week. I'll give you 1 week to explain what's really going on here. But I want answers, Ms. Blackthorne, real ones. Vivian's relief was palpable. "Thank you. You won't regret this, I promise." But as Henry watched her leave, noting how she paused to look back at their new home with an expression that seemed almost hungry, he was already certain that he would. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep in her new bedroom, Henry stood at the living room window looking out at the main house. Lights were on in several rooms, and he could see Vivian's silhouette moving past the windows. She seemed to be carrying something. Photographs, maybe, or documents. Henry's phone buzzed with a text from his sister Rosa. "How's the new job? You sure this lady checks out?" He stared at the message for a long time before typing back, still figuring that out. Rosa had always been protective of him and Lily, and she'd been the one to suggest he research Vivian Blackthorne before taking the job. But Henry's internet searches had turned up surprisingly little, just basic property records and a few mentions in local charity events. For someone living in a multi-million-dollar estate, Vivian kept a remarkably low profile. As he was about to put his phone away, another text came through, this one from an unknown number. "She's not who she says she is. Meet me at Riverside Diner tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. A friend." Henry stared at the message until the words blurred. Someone else knew something was wrong. Someone else was watching. He looked back toward the main house where Vivian's silhouette was still moving past the windows. Whatever game she was playing, whoever she really was, Henry was determined to find out the truth before it was too late to protect his daughter from whatever danger they'd walked into. The beautiful carriage house suddenly felt less like a gift and more like a very elegant cage. Henry barely slept that first night at Thornfield Estate. Every creak of the old carriage house, every rustle of wind through the ancient oaks outside set his nerves on edge. By dawn, he'd made a decision. He was going to that meeting at Riverside Diner, anonymous warning or not. Someone needed to tell him what he'd gotten himself and Lily into. But first, he had work to do. Vivian had given him a detailed list of groundskeeping tasks, and Henry threw himself into the familiar rhythm of physical labor, hoping it would quiet the storm of questions in his mind. The estate's gardens were even more extensive than they had appeared from the main drive. Acres of meticulously planned landscapes that must have required a full crew to maintain properly. Yet according to Vivian, she was the only groundskeeper she employed.
As he worked, trimming hedges and clearing debris from the ornamental pond, Henry found his thoughts drifting back to Carmen. She would have loved this place. The roses, the fountain, the way morning light filtered through the canopy of old-growth trees. Carmen had always dreamed of having a real garden, not just the collection of potted plants they'd managed to keep alive on their apartment balcony. They'd met when Henry was 22 and Carmen was 20, both working at a nursery outside town. She was studying to be a teacher while putting herself through college, and Henry was trying to figure out what to do with his life after dropping out of community college when money got tight. Carmen saw something in him that he hadn't seen in himself: patience, dedication, an instinctive understanding of growing things. "You have healing hands," she had told him once, watching him coax life back into a neglected rose bush a customer had given up on. "You see what things need to thrive, not just survive." Carmen had been the one to encourage him to pursue landscaping professionally, to take night classes in horticulture and business management. She believed in his dreams even when he didn't believe in them himself. When Lily came along, Carmen had juggled teaching kindergarten with helping Henry build his reputation as one of the area's most sought-after landscape designers. Then the headaches started. At first, Carmen brushed them off as stress from her demanding job. But the headaches became migraines, and the migraines became something worse. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday in March: glioblastoma, an aggressive brain tumor with a prognosis measured in months, not years. Henry spent Carmen's final year learning to be both father and mother to 5-year-old Lily while trying to keep his fledgling business afloat. Carmen faced her illness with the same grace she'd brought to everything else in life. But Henry watched helplessly as the woman he loved disappeared piece by piece, her vibrant spirit slowly consumed by the disease ravaging her brain. The last coherent conversation they'd had was about Lily. Carmen, weakened but determined, had gripped Henry's hand with surprising strength. "Promise me," she had whispered, "that you won't let fear make decisions for her. Don't let my dying make you afraid to live." Henry had promised, though at the time he couldn't imagine how he would keep that vow. After Carmen died, fear became his constant companion. Fear of making the wrong choices for Lily, fear of failing as a single parent, fear of letting anyone get close enough to hurt them again if they left. Now, 3 years later, working in Vivian Blackthorne's impossibly beautiful garden, Henry realized he'd been living exactly the kind of half-life Carmen had begged him to avoid. He'd built walls around himself and Lily, keeping them safe, but also keeping them isolated. No close friends, no romantic relationships, no risks that might lead to loss. But this situation with Vivian felt different. Not like opening himself to love again, but like walking into danger with his eyes wide open. Around noon, Henry took a break from his work to check on Lily. He'd arranged for her to spend the morning at the estate's small library. Vivian had mentioned it was stocked with children's books, while he familiarized himself with the grounds. He found Lily in the mansion's east wing, curled up in a window seat with a stack of picture books. The library was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling shelves and leather-bound volumes that looked like they belonged in a museum. But it was what Lily was reading that made Henry's heart skip a beat. The book in her lap was titled The Secret Garden. But this wasn't the classic children's story he remembered. This was a photo album filled with pictures of children playing in what looked like the very gardens outside. The children were all Lily's age, all dark-haired, all bearing a striking resemblance to his daughter. "Daddy, look," Lily said, pointing to a photograph of a little girl feeding swans by a pond that Henry now recognized as part of the estate. "She looks just like me, doesn't she?" Henry's mouth dried. The resemblance wasn't just striking, it was uncanny. The little girl in the photo could have been Lily's twin. "Where did you find this book, sweetheart?" "It was on the table when I got here, like someone left it just for me." Henry felt the familiar chill of being watched, manipulated. He flipped through more pages, his unease growing with each image. All the children looked remarkably similar. Dark hair, large brown eyes, delicate features. All appeared to be around 8 or 9 years old. And all were photographed in settings that looked like they were meant to showcase the estate as a paradise for children. "Miss Blackthorne?" Henry called out, his voice echoing through the mansion's grand hallways. Vivian appeared within moments, as if she'd been waiting nearby. "Is everything all right?" Henry held up the photo album. "What is this?"
Vivian's face went pale again, that same loss of composure he'd witnessed the day before. That shouldn't have been left out. I'm sorry, Lily must have been confused." "These children," Henry interrupted, "who are they?" "Former residents," Vivian said quickly. "The estate has housed several families over the years. I keep photo albums to remember." But Henry was studying her face, and every instinct honed by years of protecting Lily was screaming that Vivian was lying. The photos were too professional, too carefully composed. And the children, there was something about their eyes, a sadness that didn't match the beautiful settings and expensive clothes. "Lily," Henry said, keeping his voice calm, "why don't you go back to our house and have some lunch? I'll be there in a few minutes." After Lily left, Henry confronted Vivian directly. "I want the truth, all of it. Who are you really, and why are you so interested in my daughter?" Vivian sank into one of the leather chairs, suddenly looking older than her years. "I told you I could explain everything." "Then explain, now, or we're leaving." For a long moment, Vivian stared at the photo album in Henry's hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Her name was Olivia," she said. "She was my daughter, and she looked exactly like Lily." Henry felt the world shift around him. "Was? She died 2 years ago, a car accident. She was 8 years old, and she was the light of my life." Henry's anger warred with sympathy, but his protective instincts won. "So you found another little girl who looks like her? That's what this is about?" "No," Vivian said quickly. "It's not that simple. Henry, I didn't find you by accident. I've been looking for you for months." The confession hung in the air between them. Henry realized he was holding his breath. "Looking for me? Why?" Vivian met his eyes,
and in them Henry saw a desperation so raw it was painful to witness. "Her name was Olivia," she said. "She was my daughter, and she looked exactly like Lily." Henry felt the world shift around him. Was? She died 2 years ago, a car accident. She was 8 years old, and she was the light of my life. Henry's anger warred with sympathy, but his protective instinct won. "So you found another little girl who looks like her? That's what this is about?" "No," Vivian said quickly. "It's not that simple. Henry, I didn't find you by accident. I've been looking for you for months." The confession hung in the air between them. Henry realized he was holding his breath. "Looking for me? Why?" Vivian met his eyes, and in them Henry saw a desperation so raw it was painful to witness. "Her name was Olivia. She was my daughter, and she looked exactly like Lily." Henry felt the world tilt off its axis as Vivian handed him a birth certificate. There it was, in official black ink: Olivia Carmen Blackthorne, born March 15th, 16 years ago. Mother, Carmen Elena Rodriguez. Father, listed as unknown. Rodriguez was Carmen's maiden name, Henry said numbly. She never talked about her family, said they'd disowned her. They did. When she got pregnant, Carmen lived in a group home for unwed mothers during her pregnancy. That's where I met Carmen. Vivian's voice grew stronger as she continued, as if sharing this long-held secret was lifting a tremendous weight from her shoulders. "My husband Richard and I had been trying to have children for years. Multiple miscarriages, failed IVF treatments. The doctors said natural conception was impossible. We'd been on adoption waiting lists for 3 years when we heard about Carmen." She pulled out another document. Adoption papers, signed by a 17-year-old Carmen Rodriguez. Henry recognized the handwriting, though it was younger, more uncertain than the confident script he'd known. "She spent her last month of pregnancy living with us," Vivian continued, her voice barely audible. "The adoption agency thought it would help with the transition. She was so young, so scared, but also incredibly brave. She made me promise that Olivia would always know she was loved, that the decision to place her for adoption came from love, not rejection." Henry stared at a photograph Vivian had pulled out from the folder. Carmen, barely 18 and visibly pregnant, standing in the very garden where he'd been working that morning. Her face was younger, rounder, but unmistakably his wife. She used to sit by the fountain and read to Olivia through her belly, stories about brave princesses and magical gardens. She said she wanted her daughter to grow up believing in beautiful things. "But how?" Henry's voice cracked. "How did you know about me, about Lily?"
Vivian's expression grew complicated, a mixture of guilt and desperate longing. Carmen kept in touch, at first. Cards on Olivia's birthday, Christmas presents. She was living in Texas then, working as a teacher. She told me about meeting you, about how happy she was. Henry remembered those early years, when Carmen would sometimes grow melancholy around certain dates he'd never understood. Her birthday, Christmas, and March 15th, a date she'd always marked quietly, privately, claiming it was the anniversary of a friend's death. "The last letter came about 5 years ago," Vivian continued. "Carmen told me she was pregnant again, that she was finally ready to be a mother. She sent a picture of herself with you and baby Lily. She looked complete, like she'd found peace with her choices." Henry felt tears burning his eyes as he realized Carmen had been carrying this secret their entire relationship. The weight of giving up a child, the complex grief of loving someone she couldn't keep, the fear that he might judge her for her past. "Why didn't she ever tell me?" he asked. "Because she was terrified. Terrified that you'd think less of her,
That you'd worry she might change her mind about Olivia someday. Carmen told me once that you were the first person who'd ever made her feel worthy of unconditional love. She didn't want to risk losing that. Vivian pulled out another photograph. Olivia, at age 6. Dark curls catching sunlight as she chased butterflies through the estate's garden. The resemblance to Lily was so striking, it took Henry's breath away. After Carmen stopped writing, I hired a private investigator, I admitted. I needed to know if she was all right, if Olivia's birth sister was healthy and happy. When I learned about Carmen's diagnosis, she couldn't finish the sentence, but Henry understood. Vivian had watched from a distance as the woman who'd given her the greatest gift of her life slowly died, unable to reach out, unable to offer comfort. I wanted to help. I wanted to contact you, to offer support, maybe to let Lily know she had a sister who loved her. But Richard said it would be selfish, that disrupting your lives wouldn't bring Carmen back. Henry studied Vivian's face, seeing her pain clearly for the first time. She wasn't just a wealthy widow playing games with his family. She was a grieving mother who'd lost not one, but 2 daughters, first through tragedy, then through death. "What happened to Olivia?" he asked gently. Vivian's composure finally cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled out a newspaper clipping from 2 years ago. The headline read, "Local girl dies in hit-and-run accident." She was walking home from school, Vivian said through her sobs. The driver never stopped, never even slowed down. She was 8 years old, Henry, the same age Lily is now. Henry found himself moving toward Vivian, his anger replaced by profound sympathy. Whatever her methods, whatever deceptions she'd employed, her grief was real and devastating. After Olivia died, I became obsessed with finding Lily. She was the only family I had left, the only connection to both Carmen and Olivia. I sold Richard's tech company. He died of a heart attack 6 months after Olivia, and used the money to build this life, this perfect place where Lily could be safe and happy. Henry began to understand the scope of Lillian's planning. The job posting, the generous salary, the beautiful cottage. Even their meeting hadn't been a coincidence. "You've been watching us," he said. "I've been protecting you, making sure you got the landscaping contracts that kept you afloat, arranging for Lily's medical bills to be mysteriously covered by charitable foundations, ensuring you both had what you needed to thrive." The revelation hit Henry like a physical blow. The unexpected windfalls over the past 2 years, the clients who'd found him through word of mouth he could never trace, the insurance mix-ups that had resulted in better coverage for Lily. It had all been Vivian manipulating our lives from the shadows. The anonymous text yesterday, warning me about you, that was part of this too, wasn't it? Vivian nodded reluctantly. I needed you to discover the truth gradually. If I'd told you everything at once, you would have run. But I also couldn't let you stumble onto it unprepared. The text was meant to make you cautious, to start asking the right questions. Henry sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he learned. Carmen's secret daughter, Vivian's years of hidden support, the elaborate scheme to bring them to Thornfield Estate. "What do you want from us?" he asked finally. Vivian wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. "I want Lily to know her sister existed. I want to share Olivia's memory with the one person in the world who shares her blood. I want to—" Her voice broke again. "I want to not be alone anymore." Henry looked around the beautiful library, seeing it now through different eyes. Not a prison or a trap, but a shrine built by a woman who'd lost everything and was desperately trying to create a family from the fragments that remained. The question was, could he trust her with Lily's heart, knowing how completely grief had consumed Vivian's judgment? Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and Henry realized a storm was coming to Thornfield Estate
in more ways than one. Henry spent the rest of that afternoon walking the estate grounds, trying to process everything Vivian had revealed. The storm that had been threatening finally broke around sunset, sending sheets of rain across the manicured lawns and forcing him to take shelter in the gardening shed. As he waited for the weather to pass, he found himself surrounded by tools and supplies that told their own story. Everything was top quality, perfectly organized, and clearly chosen by someone who understood serious landscaping work. When he returned to the carriage house, soaked and emotionally drained, he found Lily helping Vivian prepare dinner in their small kitchen. The sight stopped him cold, not because anything seemed wrong, but because everything seemed so natural. Vivian was teaching Lily how to fold napkins into elegant shapes while something that smelled incredible simmered on the stove. "Daddy!" Lily looked up with a bright smile. "Miss Vivian is teaching me to make butterflies with the napkins. Look!" Henry watched his daughter's careful fingers follow Vivian's patient guidance and saw something he hadn't seen in years. Lily, completely at ease with an adult who wasn't him or his sister Rosa. Since Carmen's death, Lily had been cautious around new people, especially women who might try to take her mother's place. But with Vivian, she seemed to be responding to something deeper than just kindness. "I hope you don't mind," Vivian said, glancing up at Henry with an expression that was part apology, part hope. "Lily was hungry, and I thought we might try having dinner together, as a family should." The word family hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. Henry studied Vivian's face, looking for signs of the manipulation he'd suspected, but found only genuine warmth and a vulnerability that made his chest tight. Over dinner, a perfectly prepared chicken piccata that put Henry's usual mac and cheese to shame, Vivian began sharing stories about Olivia. Not the careful, sanitized version she might have told a stranger, but real memories, full of humor and heartbreak. "Olivia refused to eat vegetables until I convinced her they were fairy food. I told her that carrots gave fairies their night vision and broccoli helped them fly faster." "Did she believe you?" asked Lily, completely enchanted. "For about 2 years, until she learned about nutrition in school and informed me that I was perpetuating dietary misinformation." She laughed. She was 8, but she sounded like a tiny professor. Henry found himself studying Vivian as she spoke, noting the way her whole demeanor changed when she talked about Olivia. The careful composure dropped away, replaced by the unconscious gestures and expressions of a mother remembering her child. It was impossible to fake that kind of love, that depth of loss. After dinner, Vivian suggested they look through Olivia's room. Henry's instincts screamed caution. He didn't want Lily becoming too attached to a dead girl's memory. But something in Vivian's expression made him nod his agreement. Olivia's bedroom had been preserved exactly as she'd left it. Unlike the photo albums that seemed calculated to manipulate, this space felt organic, lived in, real. Stuffed animals were arranged on the bed in obvious favorites hierarchy. Books were stacked on the nightstand with bookmarks still marking unfinished stories. Art supplies covered a small desk, with half-completed drawings scattered across its surface. "She loved to paint," Vivian said softly, watching Lily examine a watercolor of the estate's fountain. "She wasn't naturally gifted like some children, but she had such enthusiasm for it. She said colors were like feelings made visible." Lily picked up one of Olivia's brushes, holding it with the reverence she usually reserved for her most precious possessions. "Daddy, look! She painted horses too!" Henry saw the wall of artwork Lily was examining, dozens of paintings and drawings featuring horses in every style and setting imaginable. Some were crude childhood attempts, others showed real developing skill. Horses were her absolute obsession, Vivian explained. Every birthday wish, every Christmas list, every bedtime story had to involve horses. We couldn't drive past a field with horses without stopping so she could watch them. "I love horses too," Lily said quietly. "Mommy used to read me stories about a girl and her horse. She said someday we might visit a real stable." Henry's heart clenched. Carmen had made that promise during one of her good days, when the treatments were working and she still believed in some days and might-bes. "Would you like to see the stables?" Vivian asked. "We have 3 horses on the property. Olivia spent hours there every day." Henry started to object, This was moving too fast, getting too complicated, but Lily's face lit up with such pure joy, but he found himself nodding instead. The next morning, Vivian led them to a section of the estate Henry hadn't explored yet. The stables were as impressive as everything else about Thornfield. Clean, well-maintained, with 3 beautiful horses who clearly received excellent care. "This is Moonbeam," Vivian introduced Lily to a gentle gray mare. She was Olivia's favorite. Olivia said Moonbeam understood her feelings better than most people did. Lily approached the horse with the careful respect Henry had taught her around large animals, but without the fear that usually made her cautious. Moonbeam seemed to sense something special about this new little girl, nuzzling her hand and whickering softly. "She likes me," Lily whispered, wonder in her voice. "Of course she does. You have the same gentle spirit Olivia had. Animals always know."
Over the following days, a routine developed that felt surprisingly natural. Henry would work on the estate's grounds, tackling projects that had clearly been neglected for months. Vivian would spend time with Lily, teaching her about the horses, sharing Olivia's art supplies, telling stories that connected past and present in ways that felt healing rather than harmful. But it was during the quiet evening hours that Henry began to see who Vivian really was beneath her grief and desperation. She was intelligent, funny, surprisingly down-to-earth despite her wealth. She asked thoughtful questions about his work, his dreams for Lily's future, his memories of Carmen. She listened, without judgment, when he admitted his fears about single parenthood, about whether he was enough for Lily on his own. "Carmen chose well," Vivian said one evening, as they watched Lily practice her new napkin-folding skills. "You're exactly the kind of father she would have wanted for her daughters." "Daughters?" Henry caught the plural. Vivian's eyes grew soft. Olivia was her daughter too, even if they never got to know each other. Carmen loved both her girls, in different ways, from different distances. I think she would be happy to know they found each other through us. Henry was beginning to understand that his initial suspicions about Vivian had been both right and wrong. She had been deceptive, manipulative, willing to orchestrate their lives without their knowledge. But her motivations weren't sinister. They were heartbreakingly human. She was a woman who'd lost everything trying to create a family from the pieces that remained. The question was whether that made her safe or more dangerous than ever. That night, as Henry tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with serious brown eyes. "Daddy, do you think Mommy would want us to stay here?" Henry smoothed her hair, choosing his words carefully. "What do you think, sweetheart?" "I think she would like Miss Vivian, and I think she would want me to know about my sister, even if she's in heaven now." Henry's throat tightened. Even at 8, Lily had an intuitive wisdom that sometimes took his breath away. "Are you happy here?" he asked. Lily nodded. "It feels like we're not alone anymore. Is that okay?" Henry kissed her forehead, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. "Yes, sweetheart, that's okay." But as he walked back to his own room, Henry couldn't shake the feeling that their peaceful routine was about to be shattered. Tomorrow was the day he was supposed to meet the mysterious person who'd warned him about Vivian. He still planned to keep that appointment, despite everything he'd learned. Something told him the story was far from over. Henry slipped out of the carriage house at 1:30 p.m., leaving Lily absorbed in painting at Olivia's art table under Vivian's gentle supervision. He'd told them he needed to run errands in town, a half-truth that sat uncomfortably in his chest. After days of growing closer to Vivian, of watching Lily bloom under her attention, lying felt like a betrayal of the fragile trust they'd built. Riverside Diner was a fixture of downtown, the kind of place where locals gathered for coffee and gossip. Henry arrived early, choosing a booth in the back where he could watch the entrance.
His nerves jangled with each customer who walked through the door, wondering who had sent that cryptic text and what they knew about Vivian that he didn't. At exactly 2 p.m., a woman in her 50s approached his table. She was unremarkable at first glance. Medium height, graying brown hair, the kind of professional attire worn by office workers everywhere. But her eyes were sharp, alert, and when she sat down across from him, Henry felt like he was being evaluated by someone who missed very little. "Mr. Diaz," she said without preamble, "I'm MS Detective Sarah Chen, retired. I've been investigating Vivian Blackthorne for the past 18 months. Henry's blood turned up ice. "Detective?" "Former detective," Chen clarified. "I worked missing persons for 23 years before I retired. But some cases stick with you, follow you home. The Blackthorne case became personal." She pulled out a tablet and set it on the table between them. "What has Vivian told you about herself?" Henry found himself torn between loyalty to Vivian and a desperate need for answers. "She told me about her daughter, Olivia, about the adoption, about losing her husband." "All true, but incomplete. Tell me, has she mentioned the other children?" Henry's mouth dried. "What other children?" Chen turned the tablet toward him. The screen showed a collection of photographs, children who looked remarkably similar to Lily and the pictures he'd seen of Olivia. All dark-haired, all around 8 or 9 years old, all photographed in settings that looked like they could be Tornfield Estate. Meet Timothy Morrison, disappeared from a playground in Richmond 3 years ago. Sarah Kim, vanished from a shopping mall in Norfolk 18 months ago. And Jacob Torres, who went missing from a school carnival in Virginia Beach 8 months ago.
Henry stared at the photos, his heart pounding so hard he could barely hear Chen's words over the rushing in his ears. "You're saying Vivian." "I'm saying that Vivian Blackthorne has an obsession with replacing her dead daughter, and she's not above taking children who fit the right profile." Chen swiped to another screen, showing a map with red pins marking locations. Every disappearance occurred within a 3-hour drive of Thornfield Estate. Every missing child matched specific criteria: age, appearance, family situation. Family situation? Single parents, financial difficulties, limited support systems. Children whose disappearance might not trigger immediate massive searches. Chen's voice was matter-of-fact, but Henry could see the anger beneath her professional composure. "Children like your Lily." Henry felt sick. But the police, surely they investigated. The official investigation concluded after 6 months. No evidence linking the cases, no witnesses, no leads that went anywhere. Chen leaned forward. "But I kept digging on my own time. Vivian Blackthorne is wealthy, connected, and very, very careful. She's also not the only person involved in this." Chen showed him another photo, a man in his 40s with kind eyes and graying temples. Dr. Michael Reeves, child psychologist. He's been treating trauma victims at a private facility connected to Thornfield Estate. Children who've supposedly been rescued from abusive situations, all fitting the same physical profile. "Are you telling me those missing children are alive?" "I believe some of them are, living under new identities, convinced their previous lives were harmful situations they've been saved from." Reeves specializes in memory modification therapy, controversial techniques that can implant false memories or suppress real ones. Henry's hand shook as he processed the implications. The beautiful estate, the perfect cottage, Vivian's intense interest in Lily, it had all been a carefully constructed trap. "Why are you telling me this instead of the police?" "Because I tried that route. Vivian's lawyers shut down every inquiry, claimed harassment. She's made substantial donations to local law enforcement charities, has connections throughout the state government." Chen's frustration was evident. "I need evidence, and you're in a position to get it. You want me to spy on her. I want you to protect your daughter and help me save those other children.
because whatever Vivian's ultimate plan is, it's happening soon. Chen showed him one final image, a construction permit filed with the county 3 months ago. Thornfield Estate is building a new wing, private apartments, medical facilities, educational spaces, all designed for long-term residential care of children. Henry stared at the architectural plans, seeing his worst fears laid out in blueprint form. She's creating a compound where she can keep her collection of replacement daughters safe from the outside world. Chen closed the tablet. "Mr. Diaz, I know this is overwhelming, but you need to understand, you and Lily aren't guests at Thornfield Estate. You're her next acquisitions." The diner suddenly felt too hot, too crowded. Henry struggled to breathe as the full scope of Vivian's deception crashed over him. The adoption story, the connection to Carmen, how much of it was real and how much was calculated manipulation designed to make him trust her with his daughter. "The adoption papers," Henry said desperately. "She showed me official documents." "Documents can be forged, especially when you have unlimited resources and the right connections." Chen's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not saying Carmen never had a baby. That part might be true. But Vivian's story about adopting that specific child, I haven't found any evidence to support it." Henry felt like everything solid in his world was crumbling. "What should I do?" "Go back to the estate. Act normal. Don't let Vivian suspect that you know anything." Chen handed him a small device that looked like a thumb drive. "This contains recording software. I need evidence of what's happening to those missing children, proof of Dr. Reeves' involvement, anything that'll give law enforcement grounds for a search warrant. And if she suspects, if she tries to, then you take Lily and run. I'll have backup positioned outside the estate, but they can't move without probable cause. Mr. Diaz, I won't lie to you. This is dangerous. But those missing children deserve a chance to go home to their real families." Henry pocketed the recording device, his mind racing. "How long do I have?" "The construction on the new wing is scheduled to be completed next week. Once those facilities are operational, I believe Vivian will accelerate her timeline." Chen closed the tablet. "Be very, very careful. Vivian Blackthorne has spent years perfecting this operation. She's intelligent, resourceful, and completely convinced that she's saving these children from inadequate families." After Chen left, Henry sat in the diner for another 20 minutes trying to process everything he'd learned. The woman who had been so kind to Lily, who had shared touching stories about Olivia, who had seemed to understand his grief over Carmen. Was she a master manipulator preying on vulnerable families? Or was Detective Chen wrong? Was there another explanation for the coincidences, the missing children, the elaborate facilities being constructed at Thornfield Estate? Henry's phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Lily painted the most beautiful horse today. She says it's a gift for you. We're having her favorite pasta for dinner. Hope you can join us." The casual warmth of the message felt sinister now, loaded with implications Henry hadn't seen before. Every kindness could be calculated. Every gesture of care could be part of a larger plan to make him compliant, willing to let his guard down.
But as Henry drove back toward Thornfield Estate, one thought kept circling through his mind. What if Chen was wrong? What if his growing feelings for Vivian, his relief at finding a place where Lily seemed truly happy, were based on something real? The only way to find out was to go back and look for the truth, even if that truth might destroy the closest thing to family they'd found since Carmen died. As the iron gates of Thornfield came into view, Henry realized he was about to discover just how far a desperate mother would go to fill the hole left by a dead child, and whether he had the strength to stop her if those lengths included stealing his daughter. Henry returned to find Lily and Vivian in the estate's art studio, both covered in paint and laughing over a canvas that showed a rainbow-maned horse galloping through clouds. The scene was so perfectly innocent, so genuinely joyful, that for a moment Henry almost convinced himself that Detective Chen had been wrong about everything. "Daddy!"
Lily ran to him, paint-stained hands leaving colorful prints on his work shirt. "Look what we made! Vivian says it's good enough to hang in a real gallery." Henry forced a smile, studying Vivian's face for any sign of the calculated predator Chen had described. Instead, he saw only warmth and pride as she watched Lily show off their collaborative artwork. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Henry said, his voice carefully steady. "You're getting really good at this." "Vivian's teaching me about color mixing. Did you know that if you put yellow and blue together, it makes green, and red and yellow make orange?" "Your daughter has a natural artistic instinct. She sees possibilities where others might only see empty canvas." The recording device in Henry's pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Every word, every gesture, every moment of apparent normalcy could be evidence of either innocence or elaborate deception. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Henry activated the recording software and began the most difficult performance of his life. He needed to get Vivian talking about the other children, about Dr. Reeves, about anything that might confirm or disprove Chen's allegations. "Vivian," he said, as they shared wine on the cottage's small porch, "I've been thinking about what you said about Olivia, about how much she loved it here. She did. This place was her whole world. Were there ever other children here, playmates for Olivia?" Vivian's wineglass paused halfway to her lips. "Why do you ask?" Henry kept his voice casual, though his heart was hammering. "I'm just trying to understand this place better, understand you better. Sometimes I feel like there are parts of your life you're not sharing." Vivian was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the darkness. "We all have parts of ourselves we keep private, Henry. The question is whether those hidden parts are deal breakers or just complicated truths that require trust to share." Before Henry could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. The number was unfamiliar, but the content made his blood freeze. "They know you met with the detective. Get Lily and leave now." Henry's hands shook as he tried to process the warning. How could anyone know about his meeting with Chen? Unless, "Everything all right?" Vivian asked, her voice carrying a new edge. Henry looked up to find her watching him intently, and suddenly he saw what he'd missed before. The casual question wasn't casual at all. Vivian's posture had shifted, become more alert, more predatory. She'd been watching his phone screen. "Henry," Vivian said quietly, "I think we need to have an honest conversation." The pretense dropped away like a discarded mask. Vivian's warm, maternal demeanor was replaced by something harder, more calculating. This was the woman Detective Chen had warned him about. "Where's Lily?" Henry asked, his voice barely controlled. "Safe," Vivian replied, "sleeping peacefully in her bed, dreaming of horses and art projects. She doesn't need to be part of this conversation." Henry started to rise, intending to check on his daughter, but Vivian's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't if I were you. Dr. Reeves is with her now, making sure she stays comfortable."
The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Henry sank back into his chair, his mind racing through options. The cottage was isolated from the main road. His phone had no signal, something he'd attributed to the estate's rural location, but now realized might be intentional interference. And somewhere in the main house, a man trained in psychological manipulation was with his daughter. "What do you want?" Henry asked. "The same thing I've always wanted," Vivian replied. "A family. Children who are loved and protected and given every advantage. Is that so terrible?" "The children Detective Chen mentioned, Timothy, Sarah, Jacob, where are they?" Vivian's smile was sad, almost pitying. "Detective Chen sees tragedy where I see rescue. Those children were living in poverty, neglect, situations that would have damaged them permanently. Here they have stability, education, love. They have families who are looking for them. They have families who failed them, Vivian corrected sharply. Families who couldn't provide for their basic needs, much less their emotional development. I gave those children what their birth families never could. Henry felt sick. You kidnapped them. I saved them, just like I'm saving Lily from a life of financial struggle and single-parent stress. Vivian's voice turned persuasive, almost hypnotic. Henry, you're a good father, but you're fighting an uphill battle. Here, Lily has everything she needs. Art supplies, horses, a stable home, a mother figure who understands her potential. I'm her father. She belongs with me. And you can be part of that. I'm not trying to replace you, Henry. I'm trying to give you both a better life than you could ever build on your own. The recording device in Henry's pocket was capturing everything, but Henry realized that evidence wouldn't matter if he and Lily never made it out of Thornfield Estate alive. What about the other parents? Don't they deserve to know their children are alive? They deserve to know their children are thriving. And someday, when enough time has passed, when the children have been properly prepared, there might be opportunities for limited contact, but those decisions aren't made lightly. Henry understood now. The missing children weren't dead, but they might as well be. Vivian had created a system for erasing their identities, their memories, their connections to their previous lives. And Dr. Reeves was the architect of that psychological imprisonment. I want to see Lily, Henry said. Of course, but first I need to know that you understand the situation fully. Vivian leaned forward. Detective Chen is a troubled woman who lost her own grandchild to the foster system. She sees conspiracies where none exists, trafficking where there's only love. She's been harassing me for months, making false allegations to anyone who will listen. Henry said nothing, letting her continue. I could have had her arrested for stalking, but I understand her pain. Losing a child changes you, makes you desperate for someone to blame. Vivian's voice grew softer. But I won't let her delusions hurt the children I've worked so hard to protect, or the new family we're building together. The ultimatum was clear. Accept Vivian's version of reality, or face consequences that would separate him from Lily permanently. What happens now? Henry asked. Now we go inside, and you see that Lily is safe and happy. Dr. Reeves will explain how we can help you both adjust to your new life here. Vivian stood, extending a hand to Henry. This doesn't have to be traumatic, Henry. It can be the beginning of everything you've ever wanted for Lily. Henry looked at her outstretched hand, knowing that taking it meant crossing a line from which there might be no return. But somewhere in the main house, a man trained in psychological manipulation was with his daughter. He had to trust that Detective Chen's backup plan would work, that help was coming, that the recording device in his pocket would eventually bring justice for all the stolen children. But first, he had to keep Lily safe long enough for that help to arrive. Henry took Vivian's hand, feeling like he was shaking hands with the devil herself. The walk to the main house felt like a death march. Vivian kept up pleasant conversation about Lily's artistic progress as if they weren't heading to a confrontation that would determine his daughter's future. Henry's mind raced through desperate scenarios. Could he overpower Dr. Reeves? Were there weapons in the house he could access? How long before Detective Chen's backup plan realized something was wrong? Inside the mansion, Vivian led him through corridors he'd never seen before, past rooms filled with expensive furniture draped in dust covers. They climbed a narrow staircase to the third floor, where the hallway was lined with doors bearing small nameplates: Timothy, Sarah, Jacob, and at the end, a freshly installed plate reading, Lily. Henry's heart hammered against his ribs. The missing children were here, behind these doors, living under new identities while their families searched desperately for them. Dr. Reeves has been so excited to meet you. He's developed remarkable techniques for helping families adjust to new circumstances.
She opened the door to reveal a room that looked like a perfect child's bedroom. Pastel walls, stuffed animals, a bed where Lily lay sleeping peacefully. Beside her sat a man in his 40s, exactly matching Detective Chen's description. Dr. Reeves looked up as they entered, his smile warm and professional. "Mr. Diaz," he said quietly, rising to shake Henry's hand, "your daughter is absolutely delightful. She's been telling me about her art projects." Henry's blood chilled. "She's supposed to be asleep." "Oh, she was quite awake when I arrived," Dr. Reeves said smoothly. "We had a lovely conversation about her new life here. Children are remarkably adaptable when presented with positive frameworks for change." Henry moved toward Lily, but she didn't stir when he touched her shoulder. Her breathing was too deep, too regular. "What did you give her?" "Just a mild sedative to help her rest. The adjustment period can be overwhelming for children. It's better if they sleep through the initial transition." Henry felt rage building in his chest. Transition to what? Dr. Reeves gestured to a chair. "Please sit. Let me explain how this works." Henry remained standing, every muscle tense for action, but with Lily unconscious and 2 adults between him and the door, his options were limited. "Your daughter has experienced significant trauma," Dr. Reeves began, in the soothing tone Henry imagined he used on all his victims. "The loss of her mother, financial instability, the stress of watching you struggle as a single parent. These experiences have created negative associations that will impact her development." "That's not trauma, that's life," Henry said, through gritted teeth. "Exactly my point," Vivian interjected. "Why should any child have to endure unnecessary hardship when they could have stability, comfort, unlimited opportunities?" Dr. Reeves nodded approvingly. "What we do here is help children recontextualize their experiences. We provide new memories, positive associations, a fresh start, unburdened by past difficulties. You erase their identities. We give them better ones," Dr. Reeves corrected. "Willie will remember growing up here at Thornfield, with loving parents who could provide for all her needs. She'll remember riding horses, creating art, feeling completely secure in her place in the world." Henry stared at the man in horror. "What about me? What about her real memories?" "Those memories cause her pain," Vivian said gently. "Watching you worry about bills, seeing you exhausted from working multiple jobs, knowing she's the reason you struggle, those aren't experiences any child should carry. She'll remember having both parents, a father who wasn't burdened by financial stress, a mother who was present for all her important moments." Henry realized they were offering him a choice that wasn't really a choice. Play along with their delusion, and Lily would remember him as part of this fabricated family. Refuse, and she would forget he ever existed. "The other children," Henry said, "do they remember their real families?" "They remember loving families who unfortunately couldn't care for them properly. It's a kinder narrative than abandonment or poverty." Henry's phone vibrated in his pocket, a single buzz that could have been a message or low battery warning. But it gave him hope that somewhere outside these walls, Detective Chen was coordinating a response. "I need time to think about this," Henry said. "Of course," Vivian agreed. "This is a big decision. But don't take too long. The initial memory work is most effective within the first 24 hours of treatment." They were giving him until tomorrow to agree to let them psychologically lobotomize his daughter. Henry leaned down to kiss Lily's forehead, whispering, "Daddy's here, sweetheart. I won't let anything happen to you." As they left the room, Henry caught sight of movement in the hallway. One of the other doors had opened slightly, and a pair of dark eyes peered out. A child, maybe 9 years old, watching their conversation with the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust adults. "Timothy has some adjustment difficulties," Vivian explained, closing the door firmly. "But he's made remarkable progress, haven't you, Timothy?" The child nodded obediently, but Henry saw something in his expression that looked like recognition or hope.
Back in the main parlor, Vivian poured herself another glass of wine while Dr. Reeves prepared what looked like medical equipment. Henry's hand moved instinctively to his pocket, ensuring the recording device was still active. "I know this seems overwhelming," Vivian said, "but think about what we're offering. Lily will have siblings, stability, every educational advantage. You'll have the satisfaction of knowing she's completely protected from life's hardships." "And if I refuse?" Vivian's expression hardened slightly. "Then you'll be choosing to condemn her to a life of struggle and limitation. Is that really what Carmen would have wanted?" The mention of his dead wife was the final straw. Henry lunged forward, but Dr. Reeves was ready with a syringe. Henry felt the needle pierce his neck, and within seconds, his vision began to blur. "I'm sorry you're making this difficult," Vivian said as Henry collapsed into a chair. "But by tomorrow evening, none of this will matter. You'll all be a happy family with no memory of tonight's unpleasantness." As consciousness faded, Henry heard sounds that gave him hope. Car engines, shouting voices, the splintering of the mansion's front door. He woke up 12 hours later in a hospital bed, Detective Chen sitting beside him with a triumphant expression. "The recording worked perfectly," she said. "We got everything. Vivian's confession, Dr. Reeves' description of the memory modification process, evidence of the other children. Lily? She's safe. Angry that she slept through all the excitement, but completely unharmed. The sedative was mild, just enough to keep her unconscious during the confrontation." Henry struggled to sit up. "The other children?" "Timothy Morrison is being reunited with his parents this afternoon. Sarah Kim's family is flying in from Norfolk. Jacob Torres—" Chen paused. "Jacob is having some difficulty readjusting to his real name and history, but our psychologists are optimistic about full recovery." "And Vivian?" "Arrested, along with Dr. Reeves and 2 other staff members. The DA is considering federal trafficking charges." Chen leaned forward. "Henry, what you did was incredibly brave. Those children might never have been found without your evidence." 3 months later, Henry stood in the garden of their new apartment complex, watching Lily chase butterflies through the community flower beds. The modest 2-bedroom unit was a far cry from Thornfield Estate, but it was theirs, honestly earned with Henry's new job at a reputable landscaping firm. Lily had struggled initially with nightmares about the sleeping medicine and confusion about which memories were real. But children, Henry had learned, were remarkably resilient when surrounded by consistent love and truth. "Daddy," Lily called out, "I caught a butterfly, but I let it go because it needed to be free." Henry smiled, understanding that his daughter was processing more than just butterfly ethics. They'd both learned something about the difference between love that protected and love that imprisoned. His phone buzzed with a text from Detective Chen. "Timothy Morrison started art classes this week. His parents say he's been drawing horses. Thought you'd want to know." He typed back, "Tell them horses represent freedom. Lily taught me that." As evenings settled over their modest garden, Henry realized that some stories about rich benefactors and desperate families had dark undercurrents that Disney movies never explored. But he also understood that the most important riches—love, truth, genuine connection— couldn't be bought or stolen or manufactured. They were earned, day by day, through the simple act of showing up for the people who mattered most. Lily ran back to him, grass-stained and breathless, completely herself in all her imperfect, wonderful reality. "Can we have mac and cheese for dinner?" she asked. "Absolutely," Henry said, lifting her into his arms. "But first, tell me about your day. The real version, not the pretty version." Lily giggled. Well, the real version is I fell down twice, got paint in my hair, and made a friend who picks her nose. Perfect, Henry said. That's exactly the kind of day worth remembering.
What would you have done in Henry's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story made you think about the difference between protection and control, subscribe for more stories about the courage it takes to choose truth over comfort.